This artist, Eddie Money, I don't know that I met anyone who was as passionate about and mentioned their fandom for a musician like Eddie Money, more so than Jersey Johnny. And Jersey Johnny, who people, of course, in Indianapolis, in particular Colts fans, came to know as the most unique cadence and accent from the East Coast that you could ever find. There was no doubt that he was Jersey Johnny, right? And, of course, his story was unique and engaging and captivating for people in Indianapolis, relatable in the fact that he was a guy that grew up in New Jersey, was a diehard Colts fan, and so he moved to Indianapolis. His primary job was he drove a Pepsi truck, but he parlayed his Colts fandom into becoming a radio host doing shows about the Indianapolis Colts. And I go back to the first time really that I was not aware of Jersey Johnny as a personality, but as a person, was this. Some nearly 30 years ago, I was working at the cigar store in Broad Ripple, and I had done radio stuff in school, and I was moonlighting at Channel 6 doing whatever I could, but I had goals and aspirations in broadcasting. And WIBC had a contest where you could call and leave a 60-second voicemail of why you thought you should be a sportscaster. And I did so. And the 3 semifinalists then had to go to Chumley's in Broad Ripple and do a radio. This artist, Eddie Money, I don't know that I met anyone who was as passionate about and mentioned their fandom for a musician like Eddie Money, more so than Jersey Johnny. And Jersey Johnny, who people, of course, in Indianapolis, in particular Colts fans, I was, number one, totally thrilled to be in the room. Number two, completely made to feel welcome by Jersey Johnny. And number three, totally impressed by his enthusiasm and knowledge about anything having to do with the Indianapolis Colts. Eventually, of course, I would end up crossing paths with him professionally speaking on a number of occasions, which I'm going to share today, not from my perspective, but about who he was. Because we learned earlier today that John Samasco, better known as Jersey Johnny, passed away yesterday. And that, became public a couple of hours ago. And I know certainly for many of my colleagues within this building, Terry Stacey comes to mind above and beyond anybody. Mel McMahon comes to mind above and beyond anybody. And then those that have worked in the past in this building. Certainly I know David Wood, who was and still is the program director at WIBC, people like Dave Wilson, Matt Hiblin. There are a ton of people. Jeremy Gray that had interned here, now is in Indiana. So many people that knew and loved Jers that I know are sad and grieving today, but at the same time, for the sake of Jersey Johnny, because he had a lot of health issues and battles in the last couple of years, perhaps somewhat, if there's a 1% that you can find of peace of knowing that there's a blessing in a passing, it would be that for the sake of Jersey Johnny. But what I knew of Jersey Johnny was this. I knew that he, I thought, did a better job than any of us in doing background work on Colts players before they stepped on the field. I thought his biggest strong suit and something that I always admired and appreciated about him, because when you do what we do for a living, you're always trying to look for a way to do something a little bit different or stand out a little bit. And Jersey did it in this capacity. I remember hearing Gary Brackett, when Gary Brackett was an undrafted free agent for the Colts. Jersey Johnny had seen him in one of the training camp practices and was very impressed by him and lined up for the Rutgers radio play-by-play guy to come on and talk about Gary Brackett. And I remember at the time thinking, man, I mean, you're having a radio play-by-play guy on to talk about a guy that's like an undrafted free agent? And lo and behold, Gary Brackett became one of, if not the most beloved defensive players of the era in which he played, because of his overcoming the odds and making a name for himself and becoming a part of the fabric of the Indianapolis Colts. And Jers had that eye to be able to see that ahead of time. And it wasn't until many years later that I figured out probably why Jersey was able to see that out of Gary Brackett, aside from the fact that Brackett is an East Coast, Rutgers, New Jersey guy, is because they were the same person. They weren't worried about how they entered. They were more worried about how they were going to stay and what their legacy was going to be. And for Jers, his legacy went well above and beyond being a sports commentator. He was with WIBC Radio when they did the Salvation Army Radiothon. Jersey Johnny was absolutely the call out of the bullpen or anytime you need him guy. If they needed someone to stand on a monument circle and ring the bell at 11 o'clock at night, Jers was happy to do it. If they needed someone to fill the midnight to 4 a.m. shift on the Radiothon, Jers was happy to do it. If it came to helping people, if it came to bringing light and attention to people that were in need, Jersey Johnny was literally, he was the team captain, no doubt about it. And that went even further into, in his post-radio career, his passion. And when I say passion, I mean to the point of almost like his own personal career for raising money and awareness for the honor flights. The honor flight that would take veterans of World War II and fly them to Washington, D.C. for the day to go and see the monuments for them. And Jersey Johnny, anytime that you saw him, anytime that I would talk to him, anytime that he would post on social media, it would circle back to the latest round of the honor flight and trying to be able to deliver for those men and women that he considered, rightly so, to be the ultimate American hero. When you go to a Colts or Pacer game and before the game, during the anthem, when they show on the video board the seat for the MIA representation for soldiers lost or missing in action, Jersey Johnny is the one that was behind making sure that the franchises did that. He was very active and proactive in talking to the franchises to make sure that they did it. And I think actually he's the one that maybe even I'm not going to take away from someone else to say that he came up with the idea of the chair in Lucas Oil Stadium. But he was certainly behind the idea of having that recognition made. I think for all of us, what you ultimately want to do is, and I think that success is defined not necessarily by who gets to the top rung of a ladder, but rather who makes sure that they are getting the top rung out of themselves. And Jers absolutely did that in everything that he did, whether it be driving the Pepsi truck, whether it be doing the radio show, whether it be raising money for the Radiothon, whether it be raising awareness for the honor flight and continuing to raise the money to just nonstop have those flights going to Washington, D.C. He was the guy. And I always appreciated and loved about him the fact that from the time that I first walked into that studio wide-eyed and blessed and privileged to be able to be a part of his show to the time where I was hosting shows in the building and he would call me up and we'd talk about something, he never, ever in any way, shape, or form treated me any different. He was the same all the way through. He was absolutely a sweetheart of a soul and a guy who, kind of like Secretary at the Racehorse, they're going to find out that I'm sure his heart was 3 times the size of the average person, because he was a jewel and a gem of a guy. And he was self-deprecating too, because, he was aware of the fact that he was all of those things. He will be missed by a lot of people, and certainly I know that you folks as radio listeners are aware of Jers, and I think that you probably are saying, well, I only knew him through the radio. If you only knew him through the radio, then you knew him, and that because of the authenticity of him. And I know that his son, who has worked tirelessly in the game of football, working in scouting and getting involved with Ball State as a student and getting to know the game. And, his family, I believe he had a daughter as well, his wife. Heart goes out to all of them. And to this city as well, because for a guy that was not born and raised in Indianapolis, but came here because of a passion for Indianapolis, he was the best of us in Indianapolis. And Indianapolis has lost one of its great ambassadors and great citizens in Jersey Johnny. Eddie, I know that you obviously worked with Jers as well. You produced his show that he did in the number of different capacities that he worked at this radio station.
Yeah, Jake, when I was first starting here, I want to say in June or July of 2019, I started doing Soccer Saturday, Pacers Weekly. Next thing you know, I was shadowing Julie Molinaro, who was the producer of the Jersey Johnny show, and now is on to Greater and Better Things. So then I took over largely for Joey at the final stages of Jersey Johnny as the host for the Jersey Johnny show on Sundays. And you would have thought that I was just any other guy. He didn't treat me any different than he would treat you. And he always tried to bring me in on the conversation, even though it wasn't my show. He'd always ask me a ton of questions. And the one segment that I feel like, Jake, we should do today in Jersey Johnny's honor is Arrow Up, Arrow Down. That was the one segment he would always do, whether it was about the Colts or about the Pacers. I know Mark Monteith was always a featured guest on his program as well. And Jersey certainly will be missed. He was really, really kind to me, and he would always, reach out to me on Facebook from time to time after his retirement as a host here at the Fan, and just check in to see how I was doing. And I know that he's going to be missed dearly.
I think maybe the last time that I saw Jers was, it would have been, I'm going to say 3 years ago. I was walking through the Indianapolis Zoo, and I was going to see the sloths. They had sloths at the Indianapolis Zoo. They may still, I don't know. But I walked over to the sloth area, and I hear this voice, and it's very recognizable, obviously, and it was Jersey Johnny. And he says, I said, Jers, what's going on? And I didn't realize that he had taken a job at the zoo.
Yeah.
So he's working at the zoo, and I said, so that's cool, that's a cool retirement gig and whatever else. He'd retired, obviously, from the truck and everything else. And so this is a pretty fun job, right? And he said, they've got me in charge today of taking everybody through. I can't do his voice, but of letting everybody know the sloths, but they're not in today. They were getting their medical treatment or whatever. So he said, 11 days I've been here. 11 days standing here with no sloths. Okay. And we chatted for a second, and I could tell that he was happy. He was happy to be doing something in retirement that he enjoyed and being around the animals. And that was the mantra that I've always said is squeeze the juice out of life. And I don't know that anybody did that more than Jers and everything that he did, because as a Colts fan, he managed to find a way to, embrace himself within the Colts culture and have them embrace him back, and getting a ring and being, a guy that drove a truck over here from New Jersey and ends up, Jim Irsay knows him and et cetera. And as well with the endless, countless hours of charitable work that he did in taking the back seat and all of that and spotlighting everyone else and other than himself, but making sure that he was getting every drop that he could out of the experiences to better others. I just think that he was the model example of what we all can aspire to be, and I will forever be grateful, as I have mentioned on the air before, personally speaking, and all of us have our own personal areas where if we knew John Samasco were touched by him, I will always be grateful for the fact that he was willing on that night to have some guy that he didn't even know that worked in a cigar store in Broad Ripple because he had won a competition come in and be a part of his radio show and be made to feel a part of it. I will never, ever forget that. We will reflect on him over the course of today, but there's plenty to talk about. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Query. That is Eddie Garrison that you just heard. It is Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And, you know, there are a couple of stories that were going to jump out at us to begin the show before, sadly, that news came into play. But among those, of course, was last night the big news that the Pacers have clinched a playoff spot. That much we now know. When I say that, I mean that they have avoided the play-in. So they are a 6 seed or higher. We know that. Now it's a question of whether or not they have home court advantage, whether they become the 4 seed, the 5 seed, whatever it may be. Also, in the last, I think actually within the last hour or so, we do have some breaking news to report here, Eddie. Camden Heide will enter the transfer portal from Purdue. This according to Deshaun Landon from 247 Sports. Heide, of course, with Miles Colvin now, I mean, that's a pretty potent punch. If those two were to go, then that is something that we've talked about with Purdue and their chemistry and their culture there. And again, this is the inevitability of it's not unlike the circumstance when, and I remember this, the very first time that I truly got a taste of it was when I was covering the Rams in the Greatest Show on Turf. And all of a sudden, guys that were nice pieces for the Rams were getting pursued and plucked away in free agency to be bigger line players elsewhere. And you saw that with the Colts when the Colts won the Super Bowl. And Cato June and guys like that are getting plucked away. It's the ultimate compliment when people are coming in and trying to get your players into the transfer portal and take them away. But at the same time, you know, Purdue has managed to avoid this. But I think what is happening right now, and I'm not a smart guy, okay? I know that. And I don't know legalities and House committees and Senate committees. I don't understand a lot of that stuff. But I do know this. I do know that I'm going to go back to this statement about Lance Stevenson. When Lance Stevenson's rookie contract was up with the Pacers and he was in the running for another contract, when Lance Stevenson's deal was up, he went to the Charlotte Hornets, who the Pacers have tonight. He went to the Charlotte Hornets and he signed a 4-year deal for less money annually than what the Pacers were offering him for 5 years. And people were like, what a moron. Except that in that season, the new collective bargaining agreement was 4 years away. And every player was aspiring to be a free agent in the year of, and it was either 20 or 21, in that year of free agency, because that's when the new collective bargaining agreement was going to be agreed upon and the new television money was coming in, and everybody knew that offseason was where the NBA teams were just going to start handing out massive contracts to get themselves back up to where they had to be on the salary floor. And so Lance Stevenson, it was smart of him in a weird way to take that deal. He gambled on himself, granted, and he lost because he didn't play well. But the reason he took the fewer number of years and the lesser money was to put himself in position to be in line for the huge handouts that were going to come in that magical offseason that everybody was targeting and not be under contract when that year came up. In terms of the NCAA transfer portal right now, what we are about to see and what we are seeing, it is in the best interest. I hate to say this. It's in the best interest of any player who has potential interest elsewhere to at least test the waters and put their name into the transfer portal. Let's call this what it is. This is free agency. And when you have now the anticipation that there is going to be a governmental or a legal ruling on the way of revenue sharing of the name, image, likeness money and television money within college basketball, meaning that it is soon going to be in some way mandated, or there is going to be a jurisdiction that players on a team have to have some divvy up or fair balance of income. Yes, they are allowed to get paid, but everybody's going to get some balance of it. There's going to be basically a salary cap, for lack of a better phrase. If that is a year away and you're a player right now, you got to go get yours, because the word now is, and I think this is fair, players that are anticipated of being starting level players at Division I, and one would assume Miles Colvin, Camden, and dare I say it, Camden Heide, and dare I say Braden Smith, those guys are going to be able, they very likely can fetch, I don't know about Heide. I mean, Heide, you're probably looking at $1 million. But a Braden Smith, he may well be looking at a team that is willing to give him $3 to $3.5 million starting range for next year for a year.
On the Braden Smith front of things, Jake, about an hour ago, he just announced that he's doing a Braden Smith camp at McCutcheon High School in West Lafayette. So I think that may put a little bit of those rumors to bed.
I'll respectfully disagree with you. I mean, he's from the area, right? And I get it. I mean, I don't think that Braden Smith wants to leave. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he's looking for it. But Texas comes to him and says, we'll give you $4.5 million. I don't think Braden Smith has interest in leaving. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not sitting here saying he's going to leave. But this is the year that it is going to be. Of any year, all I'm saying is this. In any year in college basketball, this is going to be the offseason that it is the most difficult to maintain your roster for the reasons I just laid out. And Eddie, I didn't mean that to dismiss what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I mean, one would assume as he stays involved in and is playing pickup basketball against players at Purdue, and I don't think he has any interest in leaving, but it's probably in his best interest to, at the very least, feel it out, right? Now, he maybe not, because Braden Smith has played his way into NBA potential here. So he may well say to himself, hey, I stay at Purdue and play one more year, then I go get drafted as a late first-round pick, and there's my payday. But a Trey Kaufman-Renn, Indiana you can't make comparable because all their players are already gone. But any player that has, if you are a player that has been on a program that has gone to a national championship game, that has gone to a Sweet 16 in back-to-back years, that has had the success that Purdue has had, you have to anticipate that all of their angles they're going to get, at the very least, people are going to flirt with them, at the very least. And I understand that McCutcheon is near West Lafayette and not Westfield. Yes, it's where he's from. It's where he's from. I mean, he's from Indiana. He's doing a camp in Indiana. You can sugarcoat it all you want. The reality is there is no doubt that he is going to get offers to go elsewhere. Does that mean he takes it? I don't know. But I would bet you that there are people that tell him it's within his best interest to, at the very least, see what's available. Except for that he has played his way into NBA possibility and potential. But what I'm saying is it's not like he's running Braden Smith currently is going to college, 40 minutes from his hometown? So anything he does in that area is near his hometown, is what I'm getting at. But the Pacers are at this point. Now, Eddie, here's the thing. Tonight for the Pacers, you think to yourself, okay, bada boom, 6 seed at the very worst, and now it's tonight you can kind of cruise a little bit. They go up against an opponent tonight that's had their number, right?
Have not beat the Hornets at all this season.
You almost feel like
no Trey Mann, no Brandon Miller, no LaMelo Ball.
But it's been a matchup nightmare for him, right?
For whatever the reason, yeah.
Surely tonight they can get a lead and get some rest, right?
I'm kind of surprised to see Pascal Siakam not on the injury report. You remember what Scott Agnes said yesterday about, and then Rick Carlisle was on the morning show and he said that Pascal's tired and they need to find a way to give him some rest. And
the way you do it is you get up 20 at the half.
Well, that's one way to do it, and another would be just to, put a injury for him on the injury report and give him a night off against Charlotte and then give him another night off against Utah, two teams that are in the tanks for Cooper Flag. They're trying to plant their flag for the number 1 pick.
It's one of the things, by the way, that we'll talk about with our friend from the Indianapolis Star, talking about Dustin
Dopirak,
who's going to join us at 1 o'clock. We're also going to talk about the IMS Museum. Everybody tells me that you're going to be blown away by it. And one of the curators for the IMS Museum, Jason Mansickle, going to join us at 2:30 today. But up next, a guy that's been down. You hear him on the morning show, of course, on this radio station, but he's been down at the NFL owners meeting or owner meetings, whichever way you want to word it. James Boyd will join us on the other side, the latest on what's going on down there. We'll mix in a little Pacer chat as well. We'll do it in just about 5 here on a heavy-hearted but a Wednesday edition nonetheless of Query & Company. Jersey music all day, along with Eddie Money, because that was Jersey Johnny's favorite. On a day we remember Jersey John Samasco, one of the, as somebody said it best to me, the everyman's sportscaster, which is a great way of saying it. Joining us now on the program, of course, you hear him in the mornings on this radio station. You will hear him again tomorrow. He is currently sitting, probably having a coffee or caffeinated beverage in the Charlotte airport, and maybe might even find 3 of the Charlotte Hornet fans that would be wanting to come to Indianapolis to see the Hornets tonight taking on the Pacers at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. But James Boyd is on his way back from the NFL. Now, it's owner meetings, correct? Or is it owners meeting? It's owners meeting. It's just one meeting, I think. Right, James?
No, they got a few of them. I'll say that. They got a few meetings down there in Florida.
Okay. So let's start with this. Give me the 3 bullet point headlines that were from the NFL standpoint, not Colts, but nationally speaking. 3 biggest storylines to come away from the 2025 NFL owners meetings.
3 biggest storylines. I would say the first one would be the tush push. Talked a lot about that, Roger Goodell. They tabled the discussions for now on will it be banned, and that was a weird discussion yesterday. He kept saying, like, oh, this is an injury risk on this play, but they don't have data that it is an injury risk, so that was not a strong argument in my opinion. And then also, I would say the other one would be the Steelers owner saying that they're basically, in an agreement for Aaron Rodgers. It's just, things are trending in that direction, I guess, but there's nothing been official. That's been weird. It's like they're flirting, but they won't just commit to each other. And the third one, I would honestly say it is it's a pretty big deal that Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson are going at it for the starting job here in Indianapolis. I know it might not seem like a big deal on a national scale to some people, but every time I walked around, people were asking me about the quarterback battle because that will always draw attention when it comes to football. So that is probably the biggest QB battle or most notable one in the league right now.
Here's the thing, James. I mentioned this on the air, and you tell me if I'm just being a contrarian. When that came out, like Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson are going to get equal reps at OTAs, I thought to myself, well, yeah. I mean, didn't we know that? Didn't they basically say there's going to be competition? What the hell else would it be if they didn't get equal reps? Then that's the definition of competition, is it not? You don't pay this kind of money to Daniel Jones to come in and give Ted Lasso quotes and carry a clipboard, right?
Absolutely. I think it was more validation. When I put out the quotes from Steichen and Ballard, a lot of people had some, I thought, really surprising reactions to it. I think I was more on your side, Jake, but at the same time, I understand the frustration because it's like, oh, my gosh, this is actually real. There's a real competition between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, which isn't a good one on paper. So let the best man win. But so far, either player is, best, just hasn't been good enough in the NFL. So we'll see.
I just, here's the other question at the quarterback position, James. Do you remember the Peanuts is the name of the comic strip, but the Charlie Brown cartoons? I don't know if you guys watched the Charlie Brown stuff when you were a kid, but there was the one character, Pigpen, that never bathed, and so he always had this emanating scent that came off of him. Is that Aaron Rodgers when it comes to drama? Are we at the point now where a team is finally going to say, is it possible that Pittsburgh says it's not worth the drama? Because he brought drama to New York. He brought drama to Green Bay. Every year in the offseason, it's drama, drama, drama. Enough of it.
That does sound like him, a good description of him, but at the same time, the Steelers don't have any options, and so I'm sorry if you hear that in the background, but I am not sure.
Final boarding. Where are you? It's final boarding. Where are those people going, James? Final boarding. Where are they going?
They're going to, I think, maybe Philly.
Oh, yeah. Don't get in that line. Yeah. Sometimes when I hear the final boarding call, I think to myself, that might be worth it, right? Not Philly.
No, not at all. I will be going back to Indianapolis. But getting back to your point, I think Aaron Rodgers is definitely somebody that's a little he has to make it about himself. And honestly, he's in a position to do so because the Pittsburgh Steelers don't have any other options at quarterback right now.
Yeah, it is fascinating because Fields is gone. I saw that they allegedly are. Of course, they're going to say this. Mike Tomlin's like, no, we're good. If we got to stick with Mason Rudolph, then we're good with that. Okay, really. Okay, were you surprised, James, that Jim Irsay was not there?
No, not surprised.
Was he there a year ago? I can't recall. He was not, right?
No, he wasn't there last year either. So, I mean, his daughters were there. We did not get a chance to talk to them. I did not expect them to speak either way. But that has been the trend the last 2 years. And my hope would be to hopefully get a chance to talk to him at some point this offseason. But I believe the last time we spoke to him at length about the team was during last year's joint practices and training camp with the Bears.
Hey, did everybody make it to the Philly flight? Can you tell? Does it look like – is there anybody running?
No, it looks like everybody has made it for the most part. I had a guy ahead of me on my flight who asked to get off before me because his connection was in like 20 minutes at a totally different, concourse, whereas mine was, in 40 minutes and it's right across the little strip.
I've been on planes before where they've said, like as you're approaching landing, where they've said like, hey, folks, we have 9 people on the flight here that have to get to a connection, like we're going to let them come to the front. And then everybody willingly does it, right? Like, oh, absolutely. And you like cheer them on, right? They become like your team. You're like, yes, go. Like, good luck. Make it to your connection.
No, on my flight, they were complete jerks. They were like, hey, we got people who's trying to make a connection, so if you don't have a connection, can you please step to the side? No. The plane landed, everyone stood up, and the guy in front of me was, like, irate because he could not get one good Samaritan, I guess, besides me, to let him go ahead
James,
of him.
three ways that you can test the character of a person, okay? If they don't return their grocery cart in the parking lot to the corral, if they don't have a dog voice when they talk to animals, and if they don't know how to deboard a plane. Any of those 3 people that I just mentioned are all sociopaths and should be eliminated from society. For what it's worth.
I don't have a dog voice, so maybe I am a sociopath.
You don't have a come on, you don't have a dog voice?
Nah, not really. I've never had a lot of pets in my life, but I will say I'm definitely a dog person over a cat person. I like my pets to stay on the ground for the most part. I mean, relative. I mean, when I see a cat up on the counter, I thought it was a little sketchy to me.
Lastly, Pacers in the playoffs, Detroit or Minnesota? Which one, if you're the Pacers, do you most want to see?
Detroit or Minnesota, or do you mean?
Right, I keep saying Minnesota. Detroit or Milwaukee? Which one would you? Which one would you want to face?
Give me Minnesota, but I would say I would rather see Milwaukee instead of Detroit. I think Detroit's a more complete team now that Damian Lillard is not available for the Milwaukee Bucks. I know that Giannis is the better player and the best player in that series, but I would take my chances, going at a wounded star than a team that has a ton of confidence in the Pistons who have been playing their best basketball in the last few years.
James, final thing. I saw Caitlin Clark was there in Palm Beach for the NFL owners meetings. What was she doing there, first of all? And second of all, were you there at all to see her or listen to her if she was speaking?
No, she had a private panel that she spoke on. I believe it was her, Eli Manning, and Serena Williams and somebody else as well speaking to the NFL. And when I asked Roger Goodell why she was there speaking at this panel, his reaction was that they wanted her, to come and basically talk to them about, their flag football league that they're, starting up and they're pushing for, and just more women's ownership in sports. I believe that, Serena Williams is invested in a flag football team that the NFL, wants to back as well. So just having her there, having Caitlin there as well was another way to get some more eyes, I believe, on their flag football side of things, as well as, just 2 great businesswomen who have done great things for sports in general and how they can get more women involvement in the NFL. So Roger Goodell called Caitlin Clark an icon already. That's a quote. And I think all of us will fully agree because not anybody is getting invited to the NFL owners meetings. And the last thing I'll say is I actually was at the party. They have an annual party, huge party every year for, I guess, the who's who and enough media. And I say, excuse me to this woman, and she turns around, and it's Serena Williams. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, excuse me, Serena. Like, that was pretty cool. And that was one of the few times I've been starstruck in my life because I'm usually expecting to see somebody famous when I'm working, but I didn't expect to see her at that event. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it is a phenomenon when you do what we do for a living and you still get kind of starstruck. Happened to me with Bo Jackson. So same thing, right, where you're just like, that gives you an idea how big the person is, at least just in what you saw growing up and just their stature overall within the sports world. James Boyd, you back in the saddle tomorrow, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Travel safely. Get out of the way if anybody needs, although it won't happen because you're on a direct flight now. But next time you're on a flight, somebody needs to get to a connection, get out of the way, and make sure they get there. And make sure everybody makes it to gate number 4 for Philadelphia. That is the primary responsibility. James Boyd, you'll hear him tomorrow morning, along with Kevin Bowe and Jeff Rickard on the morning show beginning at 7 a.m. on his way back. We'll have more, he will, of course, on the NFL, everything that he witnessed in terms of the owners' meetings. Dustin Dopirak going to join us about 1 o'clock from now.
Whoa. Back up.
Dustin.
Dopirak.
Close, right?
That's the first flub up by you in a while.
No, I said Minnesota. I keep
on the Dustin name.
Let me tell you 3 things where I have mental hurdles. This might be some sort of there are 3 things. I gave you the 3 things that define whether or not somebody's a sociopath. I'll tell you the 3 things that I will admit are mental hurdles for me and mistakes that I frequently make. They're the only 3, but there are 3, and I'll tell you next. Okay, for me, and I did it earlier when we were talking about.
Wait, who are you?
What's that?
Who are you?
What do you mean, who am I?
You said, for me. Oh, I don't know who you are.
My name is Jake Query.
Hi, Jake.
I do a radio show in Indianapolis. It's called Query and Company. The company is those listening, of course, and you, Eddie Garrison, are the CEO of the company, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Now, I said earlier with James Boyd, would you rather face Detroit or Minnesota? I don't know what it is, and it's only been in the last semester. But it's only been in the last half of this basketball season where I have gotten these two franchises in my mind. When I'm thinking of one, I say the other, between Milwaukee and Minnesota. And I think it's because, here's my belief on this. Other than the fact that they're both cold weather areas that are north of here, but they both start with the same two letters, obviously. But the Timberwolves now have started to wear more of these blue. They've always worn, obviously, white, blue, and green. But they've worn more of the darker uniforms, and the Bucks have started to do that. The Bucks are starting to wear those royal blue uniforms more, or their city uniforms.
Oh, the cream ones that have jerseys. The blue in it?
Correct.
Okay.
So the coloring in my mind, so I don't know why when I'm thinking of Milwaukee, I say Minnesota. It's very odd. The other two, obviously, are sometimes last names trip me up. I'm terrible with names. I remember faces. I'm terrible with names. And then the last is, and I'd like to know if anybody else has this issue. I recall several years ago when the Pacers used to have their practice facility, their practice court. It's now used for events. But when you're walking into the field house off of Delaware Street and you could look down, you see the practice court. That used to be where they would hold practices and shoot-arounds and things like that. And when I worked in television, you could go, they would have their media availability at the end of shoot-arounds. And you'd go down there and we'd watch the last 15 minutes or so of the guys just cooling down from practice by taking shots, whatever, and then walk over. You've seen, all of you have, 1,000 different clips over the years. The Fever still use it, I think, as well, of interviews that take place along like that brick wall behind them that's in that court. So, in that court on the wall, they used to have the roster of whoever the Pacers were next playing on the wall. And I looked up one time, and they were getting ready to play the Wizards, and they had Jordan, and they had his name spelled out, but instead of A-N, they spelled it O-N. So it said 23, Jordan, Jordon. So we're interviewing Isaiah Thomas, and I say to Isaiah Thomas, everyone knows of your rivalry with Michael Jordan. Is that the reason why you misspelled his last name up there? And Isaiah says, what do you mean misspelled it? And I said, well, look, you spelled it. And now, I was meaning to say the letter J, but I want to know if anybody else does this. As I'm seeing the letter J and I'm thinking of the letter J, I said G-O-R, and I said G. And even though my first name begins with the letter J, oftentimes if I'm having to verbalize and spell something out that includes the letter J, I say G even though I'm thinking J. That's my other mental hurdle. Now, does that make me a sociopath? Because if you park in a handicapped or fire lane spot, and, well, a fire lane's not a spot, but if you park in a fire lane or you park in a handicapped spot without any reason to do so, you're also a sociopath, for what that's worth. Really good point made in terms of Purdue with the transfer portal. Since they got the big man from South Dakota State, and when we're talking about Braden Smith, I don't think Braden Smith is going to transfer. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying it would not surprise me at all if he tests the waters of the free agency, as we'll call it. But he's worked his way into NBA status for certain, and he may be smart enough to know that what you have, a bird in the hand, is better than two in the bush, and he is Braden Smith. It would be smarter of him for his pro prospects to stay at Purdue with what's familiar in a system that he runs as well as anybody in college basketball, as opposed to going out and going somewhere else and getting into unfamiliar territory. But with that said, Trey Kaufman-Renn, the big man that they just got from South Dakota State, and Braden Smith, is it possible that Camden Heide, Miles Colvin, that they looked at it and said, look, the NIL money that Purdue has, they're using it for a big three and not necessarily on we, the complementary players, and so there's better money for us elsewhere. And maybe that applies to them more than it simply does the top three. Maybe that's true everywhere. Maybe every roster now is going to be, you got a big three or a big two, and then everybody else is getting Anthony Leal money, which is still good money.
Or maybe there is a team out there that's poaching Camden Heide, like you were suggesting with Braden Smith.
Well, correct. That's what I mean. Like in other words, Camden Heide may well know, and a lot of guys are good. Easiest way to say it. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that teams now with NIL money and the collectives that they have and the booster money they have and everything else, there's two ways to think of it. One is to evenly distribute it and make sure everybody gets a little something. The other is to go out and get yourself a big three. Pull the Miami Heat and get a big three. And then what are you going to do elsewhere? Oh, we'll just complement it with guys around. So if you are already in a situation where you are one of the big three on your roster, there's no real reason to go anywhere. If you're player 4 through 7 or 4 through 8, then you seek an opportunity where you can go to a school and become one of their big three. And now you're getting paid. So if you're Camden Heide, I'm just going to throw a school off the top of my head. I have no idea what this team's situation is. Pitt. You look at Pitt and you go, okay, that's been a decent program. They make the tournament, and they're willing to give me $800,000, and I know that at Purdue I'm only going to make $250,000. Boom, bada bing, let's go. I realize, people that, and I get it. I've gotten more than my fair share, I mean that in a good way, of people reaching out to me saying, look, this is ruining college basketball. It's hard to argue that point. And I think that would be, it would seem to be nail in the coffin to college basketball, if not for the fact that it does feel like there is a rev limit to it, and we are approaching it. And we're approaching it quickly because I think there's going to be some jurisdiction on it, and then it is going to come to the fact. Now, we know, everybody knows this. Everybody and their brother knows that what they're going to do is they're going to somehow regulate NIL money, and they're going to put a salary cap on it, and they're going to say there's now television distribution money, and each school is going to get X amount of dollars from the television money, and it's going to go towards paying the players and everything else. And everybody knows that 95% of the schools are going to go, okay, we get it. We'll push the envelope a little bit. And Kentucky, Kansas, Louisville, and Memphis are going to go, let's go. We're not paying attention to any of that. And still, fans are going to jump up and down. And then you're going to go back to the old rule of every time Kentucky breaks a rule, they slap Austin Peay a little bit harder. And then we're right back to the way it's always been in the world of college basketball. Don't you love it, right? Don't you love it? Back to what's going to take place tonight. Cambridge Fieldhouse, Pacers, Hornets. Hornets, man, I'm telling you. They've been a Hornets' nest for the Pacers for whatever reason. Does that continue tonight? We'll talk with Dustin.
Dopirak.
Thank you. Next. who had a couple of things pop up at the last minute. So 2 o'clock, he will join us on the program.
Vet appointment for the dog.
What's that?
Vet appointment for the dog.
That's right. So Dustin at 2 o'clock. Jason Van Sickle, curator of the IMS Museum, will join us coming up at 2:30 today. The new museum is unbelievable. And kind of you walk in and, I mean this as no disrespect. I absolutely love everything about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. I think people are aware of that. And have been very privileged, honored, I guess, to have been able to do work there or contribute to some of the things that they do. But if you've ever seen the movie, and I know I'm going on the way back here, but if you've ever seen the movie Mrs. Doubtfire, Eddie, you seen Mrs. Doubtfire?
Yes, I have.
So if you recall in the movie Mrs. Doubtfire, spoiler alert here.
Cover your ears.
Robin Williams, the character, the guy in the movie, he gets a job at the public access television place, and he's watching the children's show. And the children's show is this very older man that's playing with dinosaurs, and he's just very slowly explaining to kids the dinosaurs. And then Robin Williams, of course, becomes the new host by doing the character of Mrs. Doubtfire and having puppets and it's fast-moving and everything else. That's kind of the museum 2 years ago versus the museum today. It's the same concept, the same idea, but it is in a much more modern, updated, aesthetically pleasing, and
state-of-the-art
overload of the senses in a good way display of things there. So we will talk about that coming up at 2:30 and all the work that went into that as the museum is now back open again. And people get on me because that's another of my hurdles. I say museum. How do you say the word, Eddie?
Museum?
I believe it's museum, right? Museum. But I say museum.
I say museum as well.
Yeah. I guess we're weird. I want to get back into something that we talked about at the top of the show. If you were not with us then, and if you were, I would ask that I guess you lend me your ear a second time on this because I think it's important. In anything that we do, your goal should be to be the best version of not only for yourself in what you do, but to authentically, in a genuine fashion, be able to execute whatever task is asked upon you or do any job to the best of the ability that you have in bringing out what you bring to the table. And I don't know in our line of work, when you work in sports media, you work with and deal with all the time people with insecurities and egos, and there are challenging things about navigating through the different personalities that come within people that talk or appear on camera about sports for a living. Doesn't mean that it makes any of us bad people. It's just the reality of what we do. And it is rare that you work with or cross paths with people in the capacity that we do that are totally authentic and are on the radio exactly what you would think they would be in person, and then find out that in fact on the radio they're not a character but a person. J&V has that. And the very first guy that I met, and I'll do a shortened version of it but tell the story again, when I was a younger guy just trying to do whatever I could because I had a dream and a vision of what I wanted to be in Indianapolis in terms of sports media, and I had done I'd been fortunate enough to have done school broadcasting and those sorts of things, and was down shadowing Ed Sorensen. And Ed, I will forever be grateful for the opportunities and the access that Ed Sorensen gave me to learn underneath them. But in terms of an official on-capacity job, there are a few moments that I can recall for me where I was more thrilled and more proud and just felt like something than when I won a contest, and I believe it was in 1996, maybe 7, somewhere in there. but I won a contest to be a guest co-host on the Jersey Johnny and Grover show. And I got to come down to the Showcase studio on Monument Circle, and I remember I remember it well because, my friend Greg DeBrooker, who was a UPS driver, came down to stand outside and listen to it and see me in there. And then we went afterwards and got something to eat downtown. And the girl that I was dating at the time, it was a big deal. I was so thrilled for it. And I didn't know much about Jersey Johnny other than the fact that he was a guy that was on the radio. And I knew that and his name was Jersey, and he certainly sounded like he was from Jersey. And then I met him. And he could not have been more kind to me, could not have been more accommodating and hospitable. And look, here's a guy that had moved from New Jersey to Indianapolis because of his love for the Colts football franchise. And he raised his family in Indianapolis, and he raised a son who is a very knowledgeable football guy and was a very passionate Colts fan as well. And, a daughter and a family guy that was in Indianapolis because of his love for the football team. And he worked as a Pepsi truck driver, but Kent Sterling, who was at that time putting together things for WIBC, and John Quick, who was working at WIBC, Tom Severino, they I think saw, okay, here is a guy that is the fan's fan. This guy's story is that he came from New Jersey to Indianapolis because of a football team and carved a life for himself here, and he is the voice of the fan. And so they gave him a radio show on Sunday nights, and in that capacity, I got to come down and co-host it for a night. And for Jersey, I remember at the time thinking, gosh, this guy is himself, still somewhat fledgling as a broadcaster. I hadn't even gotten a foot in the door. But for him to be willing, even with that, to give part of his time and his airwaves to some guy he's never met before that works at a cigar store, I thought was incredibly kind of him. And over the course of time, I realized several things about Jersey Johnny. He was quirky, but he was kind. And at his core, he was kind. And at his core, he utilized his platform to not only allow other people to share his passion of the Indianapolis Colts and Indiana sports in general, but also to allow his platform to facilitate his kindness towards people that most needed it. He tirelessly worked for the Salvation Army. Mel McMahon, who works at our sister station here at B105 and WIBC as well, puts together the Radiothon and for the Salvation Army every year during the holidays. And I would guess that the very first number in her phone and Rolodex for that was Jersey Johnny, because Jers would do whatever was needed. He told me once that he loved doing the overnight shift of that because that was where he could get people to generate money, and that was where he could have conversation. But also I think Jers liked doing it then because he knew that that was the shift that others didn't want to necessarily do and fill in on the Radiothon from 1 to 4 a.m. or whatever it was that he would do. He would ring the bell for the Salvation Army down on the Circle and do whatever he could to raise money during the holidays for people that were less fortunate. In addition to that, John Samasco, was his name, known as Jersey Johnny, worked not only with that, but he became as passionate for the honor flights as anything that I've seen anybody have a passion for in their life. He routinely would try to raise awareness and fundraising to allow for military veterans of World War II and the different war. I think it was just World War II, but the military veterans to go to Washington, D.C. to see the monuments erected in their honor and the honor flight that does that. Jers worked continuously to make sure that people were aware of that benefit for their loved ones. And in addition to that, to make sure that the fundraising was there, the awareness was there, that people would show up at the airport to cheer for them when they returned, all of it. He wore that hat proudly and passionately, more so perhaps than he did for the Indianapolis Colts. But he had a keen interest and knowledge of the Colts themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, I remember when Jersey Johnny once did a show I was listening to where he had on the radio play-by-play voice of Rutgers football because Jers had been to training camp and seen and been impressed by a prospect for the Colts that was an undrafted player that Jers took an interest in. Now, I'm sure that interest was rooted in the fact that the player played for a university in New Jersey, and Jers was from New Jersey, and I think maybe even had gone to Rutgers, but it was also the fact that he thought this player showed a potential that would help the Colts. So he had on the radio play-by-play voice of Rutgers football, and at the time I thought, you're interviewing a play-by-play guy of a lower-tier football program about a guy that probably isn't even going to make the roster. Well, it was Gary Brackett, who became one of the most central and beloved figures of the Colts' greatest era in Indianapolis. And I always thought that was fitting because Gary Brackett in his journey in football was the exact same as Jersey Johnny's journey in radio and in this city. Coming to a place, putting on his hard hat, bringing his lunch pail, and tirelessly working not just to be the best version of himself in what he did, but in doing so, making everyone else around him better. And I always thought that was a perfectly fitting thing. Jersey Johnny, John Samasco, passed away yesterday. We found that out just before we went on the air today. And when I think about not myself, but the other people in this radio station that worked with him very, very closely, that are some that are still working here, some that are not. Matt Hicks, Terry Stacy, Matt Hiblin, Todd Meyer, David Wood. Some of these names you know, some you don't. But I feel great sympathy for all of those people, but more so for Jersey's family who have to be so incredibly proud of what he became. This city should be so proud of Jersey Johnny John Samasco because it is this city that welcomed him and made him feel welcome, but more so because he embodied the best in all of us in making sure that he then dedicated his platform and his time towards making this city a better place. And he worked at the zoo. He was just a person's person. And it made me sad to hear of his passing, but at the same time, it made me joyous to know of his journey because he left a mark, which is what we all should aspire to do in bettering people. And in addition to that, his own journey came with health complications in the last couple of years that he is now relieved from. But he will be missed for a very long time. Eddie, you obviously had your own interactions with Jers because you were a producer on those shows that I'm talking about.
Yeah, Jake, I was his producer, let's see, it was a handful of months probably. I was still relatively young in my professional career. I was a junior/senior at the University of Indianapolis when I first started here, and it was around that time when Todd Meyer asked me to start producing for Jersey Johnny in replacement of Jolie Molinaro, so I started doing that. And you talked about his connection, I think, during the start of the show, during the first segment, during the noon hour, and you were talking about his connection with the Colts, and I always remembered he'd always feature somebody different each week, whether that was somebody in their community relations department, someone in the front office, or someone part of the radio crew, whether that was Matt Taylor, Casey Valier, et cetera, et cetera. But Jim Irsay tweeted this about 45 minutes ago. Rest in peace, John Samasco, a great guy and one of the most diehard loyal of Colts fans. John relocated from New Jersey to Indy to be near his Colts, also volunteered often to assist with our World War II veterans. My condolences and love to his wife, Marianne, Jill, Jack, and the entire Samasco clan.
Yeah, so, the fact that he made himself, not intentionally, but authentically, part of the Colts culture, hats off on a life well lived, and one that we will mourn certainly for Jersey John Samasco. A great life indeed. Pacers in action tonight, taking on the Hornets. We talked about that. The other big news was the transfer portal of Camden Heide. Now, there are other players that you kind of keep an eye on because, Eddie, there are some, Indiana's got to build a roster, right? Indiana's got to build a roster, and I think a couple of those players that we thought might end up in Bloomington or have been on campus, but don't look now, man. Pat Kelsey's building something in Louisville, and he's got one of those guys, right?
Yeah,
in
Ryan
Conwell
Conwell
from Xavier that was at Indiana State. People thought maybe he would end up in Indiana. He has apparently verbally committed to Louisville. Now, the kid from Iowa that it was thought may end up in Indiana, it now looks like is going to go to Creighton, correct?
Yeah, that's where things stand right now. And I have a question for you, Jake, with these two developments. Obviously, they are two of the higher profile players that are in the transfer portal. It's reported that Ryan Conwell takes less money to go to Louisville instead of at Indiana. To me, what that signifies that maybe the pitch from Pat Kelsey was a bit stronger than Darren DeVries initially here in the opening goings of the transfer portal. What does that signify to you so far?
Well, I think part of it's this. If you're Conwell, now he has 1 year of eligibility left, right?
Yes.
And I don't begrudge him on this at all, and I don't mean this as a swipe at Indiana. Darren DeVries has done an excellent job, not once but twice, at Drake and at West Virginia of rebuilding rosters. And there's no reason to believe that he's not going to be able to do that at Indiana. But Louisville, if you are Ryan Conwell and you're like, look, I was it South Florida where he started?
Yes.
Then Indiana State. Then Xavier. So if you're Conwell, you're like, look, I've got a year of eligibility left. I want to see now. I've made the money, right? I got paid at Xavier. I've made the money. Like, now what I want to do is I want to go somewhere that's going to give me the best chance to experience the other side of college basketball, which is deep tournament runs. If you're Conwell, think about this. If you're Ryan Conwell, you're looking at it and you're saying, I was at Indiana State and we were Team 65, right? Everybody and their brother thought Indiana State should have gotten in. I was at Xavier and we're Selection Sunday conversation again. Louisville had an unbelievable year, and they were a 7 seed. They were probably, underseeded. But if you look at it and you're Conwell, you look at it and you say, okay, I've been on those teams that were scratching and clawing to make a fan base proud and get the most out of ourselves, but I want to go somewhere now and really get the feel of college basketball and play in big-time games and play in big-time environments and try to get into the second week of the tournament. Louisville gives you a shot to do that. Louisville's much more in a position to do that right now than those other schools. And if I'm somebody who's been through a rebuild or those kinds of things, I don't know that I want to go through that again with Indiana. The thing with Indiana, I think, in terms of the roster building and the transfer portal that is challenge, I'll say for lack of a better word, but that is going to make it interesting is the key position a lot of times where guys look in today's basketball where we're getting more and more positionless. And with Indiana and the style that one would assume that DeVries wants to run, you're talking about 4 and out, right? Like 4 guys on the outside run. What's he say? Shoot within the first 12 seconds of a possession. A lot of that in the mind of a player is centered around, okay, that's like the 3 guy. That's the wing player. That's where that position is where a guy's going to run, hit threes, pop out, whatever it may be. They already have that. The one position that Indiana has, the one, is his son, who is a very good player. He's a top 10 transfer portal player if you go by those rankings. Now, those rankings confuse me because Flory Badunga, he was a top 5 recruit a year ago, and now he's the 15th best transfer in the portal. I'm telling you, man, I worry that guy's Hana Perea vibes. I'm telling you. I worry about it. But having said that, if you look, Tucker DeVries is coming in, that's going to be, I think a lot of players are going to look at that and go, well, he's already got his son, who's a 2-time conference player of the year in the MoVal, and then played 8 games for West Virginia and is now available at Indiana. That's where the shots are going. I'm not saying that that's what in reality is going to happen, but we all played Little League, right? We all played Little League. Now, Eddie, your dad coached you, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay, so you were this guy that I'm talking about. We all played Little League with the guy whose dad is the coach, and he gets every primary role, right? He's the pitcher in Game 7.
Nope.
He's the point guard.
I was not.
I know, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I do.
The coach's son, there is that thought. And Tucker DeVries is going to be – he is a very, very good player. So it's merited. It's justified. I'm not saying that. But it has to be in the mind of a player going there of, look, I want to – Indiana's one of them I'll look at, but I know where the shots are going. I'm not saying that that's definitively where they're going, but it certainly would make sense if it feels that way to players that are exploring Indiana. That, hey, this is where that's why I'm going to look elsewhere. But it is college basketball in general. Is this ruining college basketball? I think if this is where we were going forever, then yes, I could see it turning people off. But I don't think that this is a forever proposition. Now, my understanding is this ruling is coming sometime after, either right before or right after the national championship game, of the financial distribution of funds. So you have, as I understand it, and again, keep in mind that I did fail algebra 7 times, but in the NBA you have, and in the NFL is a good example. I'll use the NFL model. You have revenue sharing. So what does revenue sharing mean, Jake? It means that they share the revenue? Yes. What it means is if Fox Television gives the NFL annually $5 billion, that's with a B, in television fees. I'm throwing out a number, but it's probably not far from that. I don't know about annually, but if the television contract that Fox signs with the NFL is $5 billion with a B, then that gets evenly distributed. That money, as it comes in, gets evenly distributed amongst the NFL teams. The Arizona Cardinals get just as much a slice of that pie as the New York Giants. We all know that the Dallas Cowboys get better television numbers, theoretically, than do the Los Angeles Chargers, or the Los Angeles Rams do better television numbers than the Jacksonville Jaguars. We get that, but it's still evenly distributed, revenue sharing. So in college basketball now, with the television contracts that are signed for March Madness and everything else, that money, I believe what we're going to see is that money is going to be evenly spread amongst the Division I universities, and then those schools then have that amount of money to be able to distribute to their student athletes in a set structure, to alleviate from the wild, wild west as it is right now. And yes, then the school itself can come up with collectives, but my expectation is that there will be some sort of a cap on the amount that you can give. Players are still getting theirs. They're still getting paid. But just like in the NBA or the NFL, there is a cap on how much can be spent. Now, like I said earlier, we all know if that cap is your roster cannot have more than $5 million spent, we all know that means Kentucky spends $7.5 million. We all know that. But you at least have, in principle, something that needs to be done. What's happening right now, I think what you're seeing, and it was pointed out to me, it's a very good point. When you look at Purdue with Miles Colvin and Camden Heide, and Purdue getting a top transfer in, if Purdue already has Trey Kaufman-Renn, Braden Smith, and a top transfer coming in, players are looking at that and they are saying, okay, so I now know that the money is, like, let's say a big three. And unfortunately, I'm the 5th or 6th guy on this roster. I need to go somewhere where I'm going to be part of a big three and get myself further up in the line in this particular year before this jurisdiction comes down, because this is the year that you got to go after it and get it. And again, the one thing that no one talks about in this, and the mistake that we all make, myself, you, Eddie, the listeners, anybody, the mistake that we make is that we are thinking of these things through the lens of a normal person. You're somebody that goes to, give me a university in the United States of America off the top of your head, Eddie, boom, go.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. You're somebody that goes to the University of Rhode Island, okay? And you are a business major in Rhode Island, you are a native of, and you grew up in Towson, Maryland, and you want to go to school out of state, so you go to University of Rhode Island. You are high, as they call it there, big party school. So you go to Rhode Island, and you get a couple of student loans, and you get a job on campus and whatever else, and you look at it, and you're like, man, I got to take 16 hours per semester, and that means that if I do that and I take summer school, I can graduate in 4.5 years. That's how a normal student does it. And then you decide halfway through when you're at University of Rhode Island, you know what? I don't think I want to be a business major anymore. I'm really interested in, I want to go into political science. Some of your credits don't transfer into the political science degree. So you got to maneuver. Okay, that's what a normal student does. So people that are looking at this saying, these kids that are transferring all over the place, there's no way that they are, how are they graduating? The reason they're graduating is because, I don't know this, but I'm assuming, if you are the University of Rhode Island, and the way it's structured right now, you know, hey, listen, if we go into the NCAA tournament and we get pod money that takes place by being in the Atlantic 10 already. If somebody from the A10, if St. Joe's goes to the NCAA tournament and wins 2 games, more money comes back to us because it gets evenly distributed amongst the league. But in addition to that, your merchandise sales, your ticket sales, all of the revenue that you get for having a successful basketball program, the deep tournament run. Look at what happened to Butler in terms of Butler's admissions and the number of applicants they got after going to back-to-back Final Fours. All of a sudden, kids from Chicago and St. Louis and Atlanta are like, man, Butler seems like a cool school. And their number of enrollment applications goes up threefold. So now they can be even more selective in who they take as regular students. All of that is benefit from their athletic program. So it's in the best interest of these universities to put out onto the floor or onto the field the best programs they can for revenue generation and booster money. So they're not dealing with normal student rules and accepting transfers and credit hours and degrees. It's in their best interest to work with that department. I'm not saying that it's wild, wild west, totally rogue, and a guy that has, that can't chew gum and walk at the same time is going to get admitted. But it is my belief that and I saw a little bit of this up close and personal when I was in college, that the way and the processing of the academic requirements and degree for a student athlete are, in fact, different than that of a regular student. So my assumption would be, take like Conwell. If he's at 4 schools in 4 years, he is going to have a higher percentage of his credits that are going to transfer in for degree than a student who just started out like myself at University of Kansas, then went to IUPUI, then went to IU, and had to sit there and mix and match classes and credits all over the place. It's pretty fascinating. And is it ruining college basketball? If it was this way forever forward, probably yes. But I actually think what we're in right now is this super awkward, Oxy 10 wearing, headgear wearing, adolescent transition stage of money in college basketball. And everybody's about to go through puberty here within the next couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden, everything gets a little more balanced on the other side. So we have tickets to give away for tonight's WBIT tournament at Hinkle Fieldhouse.
They're 4-packs. 2 4-packs, Jake.
So Eddie Money's half correct there, right?
Yeah.
Here's how we're going to do this, though. If you're listening, pay attention. At 239-1070, if you call in, and this is, listen, I would go watch a tricycle race at Hinkle Fieldhouse, right? There's nothing better than Hinkle Fieldhouse with, especially like at dusk when the sunlight's coming through. But then just the field house in general, the magic of Hinkle Fieldhouse is unlike anything else. I mean, the Speedway's got it. You know, we're lucky to have great venues here in Indianapolis. But Hinkle is a crown jewel of college basketball. So tonight, the women's BIT tournament, the championship of it, is being played at Hinkle. Did you say 6 p.m., Eddie? Is that correct?
6 p.m.
So
yes.
If you win, you get tickets. Is it electronically sent to you?
Yes.
What a perfect chance to, whether it be take the kids or just get a couple of buddies and go down and watch basketball between Minnesota and Belmont tonight, especially if you have young girls. But the way I want to give the tickets away is this. 239-1070 is the telephone number, okay? If you call in to win the tickets, we'd be happy to get them to you to be able to go tonight. And all you have to do, now this is where I say pay attention, all you have to do is tell us something that you most enjoyed about listening to Jersey Johnny on the radio. It's not hard to do. I mean, anybody listening right now knows Jersey Johnny and listened to Jersey Johnny and the different things that he did on the radio or the different fun things about him. He was very funny on social media and interactive, etc. So you call in at 239-1070, and when you do, you're going to come on the air, and when we do it, I'm going to say, tell me something you like about Jersey Johnny. It's very simple. So we'll do it in just a couple of minutes from now. Eddie, you went to the Reds game last night, correct?
I did go.
And was it cold?
It was like low to mid 50s.
That's cold.
It's baseball weather, Jake.
Yeah.
April baseball weather. What do you expect?
Now, it was a 1-0 game, right?
Yes, Wyatt Langford hit a home run in the top of the first inning, and then there was no scoring outside of that. It was the only thing.
Did you have a Skyline chili Coney dog?
No, I did not. They had a 3-2-1 special last night. $3 beers, $2 hot dogs, $1 ice cream helmets.
And you went with what?
The hot dogs, duh.
Now, what's the 9-inning challenge? Have you ever seen this that people do?
I have. It's where you either drink a beer for every inning or you eat a hot dog every inning. And you have to complete each one before the inning ends.
Why would one do that?
I don't know. It's fun.
It's fun to eat 9 hot dogs in 9 innings?
It's a fun little competition you can do.
The beer thing would just be too expensive.
Well, that's why you go on Tuesdays, Jake. They're the cans, the smaller cans, for $3.
Still, man, nine. That's, you ain't driving. I'll tell you that much.
Well, that's why you eat the hot dogs.
Yeah, the next day would be very rough, would it not?
I'm sure that night would be a little rough too.
Lance Lynn yesterday announcing his retirement. By the way, great career for Lance Lynn. It makes me feel old too because everybody remembers when those guys were obviously just breaking into the league. I mean, all the guys from Brownsburg and from Central Indiana. But the Reds themselves, Eddie. Now, tell me this: what's the? I'm hearing more and more about this. Right? I want to know your take on it because you're a baseball guy.
Okay.
Tell me about the torpedo bat.
What do you want to know?
Tell me why they're different. Tell me why the Dodgers have hit like 56 home runs with them. Or the Yankees, the Yankees hit a record number of home runs as well. Why did no one think of this forever ago, and is it going to be legal forever?
So I'm going to assume that they will try to keep it legal, and I think it's a good thing for the sport just because there's not a ton of benefits right now to the hitters. I think the pitching is at an all-time high with all the stuff that all these pitchers have now with how much the ball moves. It's ridiculous, and so you take essentially what you're doing is you're taking a portion of the bat that's at the toward the end where the barrel is the largest, and you're moving it closer to the handle of the bat. That way, the thicker part of the barrel is now closer to the hands, and that's where most of these hitters nowadays are getting, they're getting jammed or whatever the case may be. So it's making it easier for them to make harder contact with the baseball. That's why the Yankees are having a ton of success early, lead the league in runs, lead the league in home runs, lead the league in extra base hits, which is honestly a little bit remarkable in that regard since the Dodgers have played 2 more games than everybody else, and that's the best lineup that but baseball could buy this year. And so it's starting to sweep across the rest of the Major League Baseball. There's more players that are starting to use it. I'm interested to see how long it is until there is a further discussion on whether or not it is legal or illegal. It started with the Yankees because of someone in their analytics department trying to help out a couple players. Anthony Volpe, I think, was the first player that really started using it for them.
If the goal is to get the ball to hit the primary barrel of the bat, the thick part of the bat, why don't you just stand back another half step in the batter's box?
Because then you open up the outside part of the plate to get obliterated. You can't reach the outside corner.
Yeah, fair. Okay. So it took how long for someone to figure this out?
I'm not sure how long it took.
That's the thing that amazes me. Nobody at Louisville Slugger thought, you know what, we should move the barrel around.
Well, my guess is that you have to go through a whole bunch of different hoops and, to make sure you're still within the rule book of Major League Baseball of the diameter of the barrel and whatnot.
Do you own a bat, like a commemorative bat of any sort?
I do. I have a Louisville Slugger bat, yeah.
Okay, is it a Louisville Slugger bat that you use? I don't mean that you use to go to the batting cages. I mean one that has a name on it or something like that.
Yeah, it's got my name.
And you got it
etched into it.
Did you go down?
Yeah, Louisville Slugger Museum, yeah.
How much was it?
I couldn't tell you. I was probably 14, 15 years old, so you're talking about 12 years ago.
My prized possession, if your house caught fire, Eddie, is that one of the first things you'd grab?
Ooh, probably not, unfortunately, because I can always get another one.
I have a bat. It's a Louisville Slugger bat, painted red, and in gold it has engraved the signature of the 76 Big Red Machine, and it says Cincinnati Reds 1976 World Champions. So it's, the engraved signature of the entire team. I believe they were given to season ticket holders commemoratively after the 76 World Series. And I don't know that it has great monetary value because I don't think it's anything rare, but it was given to me by my godparents. It was their son's, and their son passed, and it was given to me when I was a kid. That's the number one thing. The number one thing in my place, after Boo and I guess my Indy 500 helmet, maybe. I think actually I would grab the bat before the helmet.
Really?
Yeah, I really do think I would. Okay, 239-1070, the telephone number. If you would like to go tonight to Hinkle Fieldhouse to see Minnesota and Belmont Women's BIT Championship, it's just going to be an awesome night to be at Hinkle Fieldhouse, bottom line. I know Pacers play tonight as well, but we would love for you to go. And all you have to do right now, we got a 4-pack that we can get to you at 239-1070, and the phone lines are open now. Music all day from artists that hailed and or were born in or have connection to the state of New Jersey in honor of our friend Jersey Johnny and his passing yesterday, as we found out today, and certainly condolences to the Samasco family. So, Eddie, we have tickets to give away, but we have a conundrum. But again, see, let me tell you something. Were you ever in Scouts?
No.
Okay. You know, I was a Cub Scout, and the Cub Scouts, as you know, their motto is be prepared, right?
Yes.
And you've always heard me say, because there's one thing about me, I know that yesterday you said that the neuroticism of my brain is difficult for you, right?
Some days, yes. Some days it is.
But if there's one thing for me, I always try to come up with a backup plan. Have you ever noticed that? That I'm always, like, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, right?
It wasn't?
No.
I didn't know that.
So I always try to have a backup plan. I think I told you one time, and I'm only saying this to pontificate on a sports-related topic, but I was one time interviewing, this would have been at the end of Reggie Miller's career. I was interviewing Donnie Walsh about Reggie Miller, and I said, and we were talking about Reggie, and he said, you know, truth be told, the player that I would most looked at in that draft was Kevin Johnson, the point guard. And so Reggie Miller was kind of the backup plan. I can't recall if Kevin Johnson went off the board just before or what the situation was. But either way, we then started talking about just acquisitions and whatever else, and that's when Donnie said to me, the one thing I learned early in my career is that you had to have a backup plan ready to go at all times, because things happen fast in the draft and in free agency and things like that, and you have to have a plan B to immediately go to, and then no one would know that it wasn't your plan A. And he said some of the moves that I made that worked the best for us were actually my plan B, but no one knows that because plan A wasn't there. I said, oh, give me an example. And he said, I'm not going to give you an example, but I will just tell you that. I said, okay. Always found that interesting. That's not the case here. I'm not pretending by any stretch of the imagination that we're going to that depth of severity, but we have the tickets to give away, and we want to give the tickets away, and we want people to go and enjoy it, but our phone lines are down, right? A chipmunk actually ate through the phone line, correct? Isn't that what we found out? We just looked down and looked, and all we found was a frayed phone line and acorn shrapnel. So we believe that a squirrel or a chipmunk of some sort got through to the phone line and nibbled the wire. And a lot of people would look out, and they would say to themselves, oh, the water's rising, I don't have an ark. We do. Because the best laid plans of mice and men, right? So here's what we're going to do. If you would like to go tonight to the WBIT championship at Hinkle Fieldhouse between Minnesota and Belmont, you can't call in. We can't give the tickets away that way. But fear not. We have how many to give away, Eddie? 2 4-packs?
2
So
4-packs.
we're looking for 2 winners, right?
Yep.
Send me a text at 317-523-9288. 317-523-9288. If we select you, then I will text you back, get your information, and we will email you electronically the tickets so that you can go tonight at 6 o'clock and enjoy a great night at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Take the kids, whatever it might be. 317-523-9288. Do that, and bada boom, you're on your way. See, best laid plans, Eddie, right? Wait, did I just hear something? Was that the chipmunk?
I didn't hear anything.
Yes. Okay. Now, the other problem I have is this. If people have tried to call me at my phone number, which I very much appreciate. Remember I told you I was getting all the spam calls?
Yeah. Did you get that resolved, by the way?
Yes and no. I was getting all the spam calls, but the problem is people suggested to me to download an app on my phone, which I did, and it was wonderful, except for that it was silencing literally every single call. Like Shannon called me and said, I just tried to call you, and then it rerouted me to some phone bank center, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And I'm like, well, that seems to be extreme. It was great that the spam calls were getting blocked, but so too was any number that my phone didn't recognize. And then it bled over into the numbers that my phone did recognize because they were in my contacts.
Oh, that explains why I couldn't get through the
Correct.
other day.
And I think it started blocking texts as well, because now the only problem is now the only texts I am getting are telling me about tolls.
Really?
Yeah.
Weren't you just in like Alabama?
I was just in California and I accrued some tolls. Apparently I'm up to my rear in arrears with tolls because
I thought you were in Alabama with some tolls.
No.
Like yesterday.
That's right. Yeah, or Illinois.
Yeah.
And you're like, you were in Illinois this morning. No, I wasn't. But yes, I get the one a lot for like the Ohio River area. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I have been over that, but not in a while. Okay, so far Eddie, I've got some. If we already have 2 people that have messaged me, do we call off the dogs here? I enjoy getting texts from people, don't get me wrong. Winner number 1 right here. Jake, I would love the tickets, and Jersey Johnny made me a Colts fan. Bingo. Let's go, baby. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Do I use that one? Or do I have to reserve one of them for the very first person?
Weren't the rules that, at least for the call-in, that they had to provide something they liked about Jersey Johnny?
Here's the thing. Somebody did say this. I would love to take my kids to the game. And they said they love the show. Do they love? Let me ask you this: if you love the show and you want to take your kids to the game, which do you love more, myself or Eddie? If you had to go with one of the 2 of us, which one would you pick? Who would be the more fun seatmate, myself or Eddie? You don't want to sit behind Eddie. We know that. You wouldn't see the court. But between the 2 of us, which one would you rather actually sit with?
Be careful. If you sit next to Jake, you may have a headache.
From?
All your cologne.
I'm wearing a different one today, and it's wonderful. I smell Irish spring clean today, do I not?
I don't know. I haven't smelled you today.
Well, I'm just telling you. For what it's worth. Transfer portal news. Camden Heide is entering the portal. That joins Miles Colvin. That was the big news that came out earlier today. Apparently, the ruling that's going to take place with the NCAA in trying to basically corral all of these things is going to be effective July the 1st. So on July the 1st is when it goes into effect. So that actually could bleed over into football as well. Can you imagine? We're going to get into the football side of things. Hey, Jake, I can't go to the game, but I will say you are brutally handsome. Hell yes.
Oh, my gosh. That's in reference from the other day, isn't
Yes.
it?
And I can't believe, by the way, we have made it on this program. We are approaching now 2/3 the way through the show today. We began the show at 12. We talked about Jersey Johnny. We did the same at 1 o'clock. We've talked about the transfer portal. We talked about torpedo bats. We talked about the Colts. We talked about the Pacers. We'll get more into the Pacers if we can reach Dustin. We'll see. And with all of that, 2/3 the way through today's show. And when I woke up today, thought to myself, there's one thing that's going to happen on the show today. One that I know definitively. I had a feeling we'd talk about the Pacers. I had a feeling we'd talk about the transfer portal. I was surprised about Camden Heide just before we went on the air. Obviously, it is terribly sad and about the news about Jers, but we talked about that. And all of the different things heading into today, I thought to myself, well, I know one thing emphatically, without question and without doubt, that's going to take place today. And here we are now, heading into the 2/3 the way through the show mark. And I cannot believe, and I have never been more disappointed than in anything in you, Eddie, in your lifetime. I've never been. You don't anger me. You just disappoint me. I could not be more disappointed in your lack of execution in one area of observation today.
Oh?
And it falls on you.
It does?
Yes.
The heck did I do now?
You got 4.5 minutes to figure it out. So we're going to find out just how observant. By the way, thanks to all who wrote in and texted about the tickets tonight. Tyler, you are on your way. We will get them to Tyler, and I believe I'm saying the name correctly. I certainly hope so. Hadessa, you are also on your way. And it is much appreciated that you listen to this program and also for sharing your kind words both about your kids and the fact that Jersey Johnny helped make you a Colts fan. Eddie, have you figured out what it is that I'm a little surprised has not come up as a topic of conversation from you today?
No, have not.
You just do me a favor. I know we're going to get to our friend from the Indianapolis Star. We're talking about, of course, the Pacers beat writer Dustin
Dopirak.
in just about 30 seconds here. But just look straight ahead, absorb what is before you right now, and tell me if there's anything that you are surprised that you did not notice about today's program.
Val Kilmer died yesterday.
Correct. We haven't talked about that. That's a good point.
Is that what you're talking about?
You know, I'll say this about Val Kilmer. I think Val Kilmer is one of the most underappreciated actors of our era, and he was very acclaimed. Even with the acclaim that he had, his ability as an actor, I think he is one of the greatest of the era. There's a fabulous documentary about him that was made by his son because his entire life is essentially on home movies because he and his two brothers began making movies at home when he was a young man. He went away to art school, acting school, and while he was away, his youngest brother drowned, and it really, really impacted him. But the thing about Val Kilmer that I think is the greatest testament to his work is this. If you ask three people the role that they most identify or most appreciated from Val Kilmer, it is very possible that you would get three different answers of three different roles, all of which are completely justified, that all have to do with a completely different realm of movie. Whether it was a comedy, whether it's an old Western, whether it's a musical, cultural depiction, or whether it was a drama, he has or an action film. He has very significant contributions in all genres, all of which could very easily be defined as his signature role. I thought the guy was an incredible, incredible talent, and it's very sad. Passing away yesterday of pneumonia at the age of 65. Pacers in action tonight taking on the Charlotte Hornets. That's been a boogaboo for them for certain, and Dustin joining us now on the always busy and available still to be sponsored guest line. Dustin, let's begin with this. Pascal Siakam, there is no doubt that as the Pacers are trying to now perhaps put themselves in the best position down the home stretch, they have some guys that fatigue is starting to look to settle in just a little bit. Will Siakam see a limited role tonight for that reason?
I don't know about limited. I mean, I think he's still going to play, but I mean, he's certainly not on the injury report or anything like that. But I imagine you're trying to steal some minutes with him off the floor. I mean, on the flip side of that, you know, I mean, not that this is a big piece to it, but Tony Bradley is out tonight, and they seem like they're trying to get more work out of that sort of Walker, Siakam, Toppin smaller lineup. Obviously, that was really big for them the other night in the win over Sacramento. So, I mean, it's probably a good idea. I mean, to your point, like there does seem to be fatigue setting in. I mean, he's just been so incredibly consistent that sort of any drop-off is kind of noticeable because he's just been so, you know, that they've been able to rely on so much for so long, and he's finally kind of stringing together some, you know, inefficient, not necessarily bad, but inefficient, you know, outings. I mean, it's 14, 15, 13, 11, 11. And you know, for a guy that was averaging, you know, he went through a stretch where it was 25, 27, 26, 29, that you're starting to look and be like, oh, okay, all right, what's going on here? So, I mean, you would have to think you want to steal some minutes from him. Obviously, I think that makes it significant that they clinched a playoff berth last night without having to play. You know, it becomes less critically necessary. Obviously, it's still important for these guys for seeding. They still want to get the number 4, but you have to think they look to find some minutes where they can take him off the floor and just basically get him a little bit better geared up for the postseason.
Dustin, our friend Jersey Johnny used to do a segment with Eddie called Arrow Up and Arrow Down, right? So I'm going to do that in his honor. because we're thinking about Jersey today. In his honor, I'm going to ask you this arrow up and arrow down. For the Pacers right now, and I'm not talking about the way that their body's feeling. I'm talking about just the way they're playing right now, their game, okay? Give me two players heading down the home stretch that are arrow up that Rick Carlisle has to look at and say, those guys are starting to really play well at the time that it matters most.
Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin.
Okay, would totally agree with both of those. Toppin in particular.
And I would throw Jarris Walker as a third.
You know, Obi Toppin to me is kind of like what I just said about Val Kilmer, and the fact that whatever role you need him to play, he seemingly is able to do it. I think his versatility has really been a positive. What have they done to be able to kind of tap into that?
I mean, well, and the big thing is he started making shots. That went a long way. I mean, prior to that Minnesota game, you didn't see he went through a long stretch. I think it was like 10 of 41 going into that game from three. Like I don't know how far back that went exactly, but I think it was like 6 or 7 games or something. I mean, he was really struggling to shoot the ball. But really, that game out in Minnesota really kind of it's like he sort of reconnected to his ability to hit outside shots. And since then, I mean, that's kind of the biggest change, the biggest difference. I mean, I don't know that you've seen any more or less of what he's done. Otherwise, I mean, they've definitely pushed him to rebound more this year. And you've seen ups and downs for that. I mean, you saw really a stretch, I think, in December where he really rebounded the ball well, and then he kind of fell off a little bit in January. You didn't see as much of it. A little bit better in February and sort of picked up. And he's been, up and down as far as that's concerned. I mean, that's the area they really wanted to get better at. Defensively, they want to get better at. He's been okay at that, but I mean, I think just obviously the thing that's really stood out over the last really 10 games or so, I guess, there's 7 or 8, I guess, going back to that Minnesota game, is just he's had a couple games where he shot it really well. I mean, you have 7 of 10 in that game. He was 6 of 9 in the other Timberwolves game. He was 3 of 4 in that win over Dallas. 5 of 8 the other night against Sacramento. I mean, those games have really changed things. And it's still been effective around the rim, obviously. Always a guy that you can trust to run the floor and finish. He's moved the ball well, played with pretty good energy. Again, like you'd like to see more consistent defense, you'd like to see more consistent rebounding. But when he's shooting the ball well, he becomes a real weapon, and that allows you kind of to play smaller. It's a situation where you can have these stretches where Miles Turner's in the game, and you don't necessarily have to put Bryant out there. And when he can make some shots for you, basically, he can allow you to play smaller and faster. So I think all those things are coming together, and it's created a role and it's been pretty effective.
Okay, arrow down. The 2 players that Rick Carlisle is going to bed and thinking to himself, man, I don't know what's going on, but we got to get more out of that than what we're getting right now.
That's a good question. I mean, one is Ben Shepherd. And I don't think it's a situation like he's obviously a guy who just does his stuff, and that's why Rick Carlisle likes him so much, is that he's called him, he says, I mean this in the best way, a system guy. He moves the ball when he's supposed to move the ball, he shoots the ball when he's supposed to shoot it, and he plays defense, and he runs really hard. I mean, I think he's done not quite as well in some of his defensive assignments as you like, and you need him to hit some more shots than he's hit. I mean, and obviously he's just a straight catch and shoot guy, and that's a majority of his total shots is just catch and shoot threes, and those aren't going in as high a clip as you want. You just need a couple more of those to go in. It's not like he's taking bad shots where he looks really bad taking them, but you just need that. You need him to get better. You would say Siakam. I think to the point that we just said, is just he's gone a couple games where he's been under 15, and he hasn't had a stretch like that for a while. And he's not playing poorly. I mean, I think his plus minus is pretty good. He's still rebounding pretty well. He's hit some big shots at times. I mean, he obviously hit the big one that really turns into, I guess you would say, the clincher the other night against Sacramento. But it's just a little bit less efficient than you've been used to seeing from him so far. And obviously, you want to see what Mathurin looks like when he gets back. He's obviously been kind of up and down. That's the guy you put on that list. Nemhard, you'd like to see some more consistent scoring, even though you're seeing the defense. I wouldn't say there's anybody else that really stands out as trending down that way. But there's a couple that you're like, they're just all right now.
Why has Charlotte been a tough matchup for them?
I mean, they got talent, and it always just seems to come together for them the right way. I think there's been a few occasions where, this Pacers team obviously has an issue with, maybe not taking teams seriously enough when they're shorthanded, or they're in a position where they've beat a lot of good teams and then they get the Charlotte team and they think they're going to get them and they don't. And so I think Brandon Miller, for one thing. I mean, one thing that bodes well for them tonight is some guys that have really killed them aren't around. Obviously, LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller are both out for the year. Miller is a guy that's really been a problem for them, the last 2 years. I mean, he just really seems to stick it to them. And I mean, because he's a heck of a player and he's going to be really talented. And they've got, Charlotte, I think, has a chance to build in the same way that Detroit and Houston have, where you stack enough of these, high draft picks and you just sort of hold yourself back long enough and just keep stockpiling, and then eventually you're going to have a team that's talented enough to compete. And they're probably one or two more of those guys away, but they're getting close, and you see some situations there where somebody gets on a roll and they get going and they become tougher to beat. So I think there's been times where they haven't taken them seriously enough. There's times where Charlotte's just caught them at the right time, where either they were shorthanded or they weren't all together yet. I mean, I think they beat them in one of their worst games of the year. It was like December 8th. I mean, I feel like it's been a while since they played Charlotte, but they were. I mean, that was one of the Pacers' worst games all season. I mean, and that was still in the first 25 games where they just did not have it together yet. They still weren't entirely healthy, and so they caught them at the right time. But I think there's a couple of factors. One again is I think that sometimes they don't take them seriously enough, and the Hornets managed to catch them at the right time.
Our guest on the program, joining us on the always busy guest line from the Indianapolis Star, is our friend Dustin
Dopirak.
Talking about the Pacers and Hornets tonight. Dustin, here's one that you did not have on your bingo card, okay? I know that Isaiah Jackson has been out with the injury this year, the Achilles, and I am a fan of Isaiah Jackson. I think he brings something to the table that is just very hard to replicate. However, they've gotten good play from Thomas Bryant, and in addition to that, and I know that it's been very limited, but for what you want out of a number 3 center, I think they've gotten good minutes as well out of Tony Bradley in spot situations. Those guys, I think all 3 of the players I just mentioned are all free agents at the end of the year. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But does that alleviate a little bit the necessity to try to get Jackson locked down with the uncertainty of his health?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say, I mean, obviously they know certainly better than I do what his rehab does look like. I mean, I think just seeing him walking around, he seems to put on some weight, which is probably not a bad thing. He's obviously been a skinny guy, and I don't, and you have to imagine that with the Achilles, he's been able to probably, do a lot of work on the upper body, which might help. And so it does alleviate it. It does say if you do have concerns, if you don't feel like it's coming along the way that you want. I mean, I think they have to keep one of those two guys, but I think, obviously the flip side of the injury issue is you can probably keep Jackson around for less than it would have cost you otherwise. It obviously just you're able to buy low there. And so I think it's possible to, keep maybe Jackson and Bryant both and be able to get them both, at or close to the veteran minimum. And that allows you to kind of, that kind of helps you from a salary cap deal. So, I mean, I think if Jackson somehow gets on the market and commands, if someone just really, really believes in him out there and wants to throw money his way and is like, hey, we'll give you $10 million a year, well, then they can let him walk and feel pretty confident having Thomas Bryant as a backup and feeling like, okay, he's been fine for the role that he's been asked to play. And you still have Obi going forward. Obviously, there's a possibility they might have to move Obi to clear space to sign Miles Turner, but if you're going to have Obi and you have Thomas Bryant, you feel good enough about your 5 situation that if you have to let Jackson walk, you're not that much concerned about it. But if you really like what he's doing, I mean, you might be able to just keep him around for cheap. And to your point, I mean, I think he obviously brings a lot of energy. The leaping ability is a big deal. Again, if he's got some more, kind of upper body muscle, that might be more helpful as well, as long as it doesn't cost him any explosion in his lower half. So, you have it. He can be a really effective guy, and you might be able to keep both of them for a relatively cheap price. And so if you can do that, you want to look into it. Again, if Jackson's going to cost you a lot to keep him, you feel better about just having Thomas Bryant. But if you feel like you can keep him for cheap, I think there's still a valuable player there.
Pacers in action tonight, taking on the Hornets. Game tips at 7 o'clock. Eddie, you will be running the board for the radio broadcast with Mark Boyle, Eddie Gill, Pacers Radio Network on this radio station, beginning at what time? 6:30. 6:30, the pregame, of course, tonight. That same will hold true for Utah on Friday at the Fieldhouse. Then a little bit tricky for the Pacers because they go to Denver. They host Washington, which one would think they can get. 2 with Cleveland, and then Orlando, which has been tricky for them in terms of matchup, not unlike Charlotte. So then the question becomes this, Dustin. If you are the Pacers and you're looking at it, we've had a lot of discussion about this. Looks like a fait accompli that it is going to be in round number 1, either the Pistons of Detroit or the Milwaukee Bucks. The better matchup for Indiana at this point in the season is which?
The Bucks, just because they don't have Damian Lillard. I mean, if that's the thing. It's just that, I mean, like the Bucks are getting by on fumes right now. And I mean, if you were facing Damian Lillard, then it's an entirely different story. Just like if you were facing the Bucks with Giannis last year, it's an entirely different story. But if you take one of those two guys out of the picture, I'd rather face them than face a fully together Detroit team. Basically, I mean, Cunningham's terrific, and those guys want to come at you, and they're going to be, that's obviously going to be a super motivated team. The Pistons have been out of the playoffs for a while. Whenever you go in their building, it's going to be just raucous. They're already, clearly getting chippy with the Pacers already. JB Bickerstaff looks like he has something very much to prove after the whole Cleveland thing, and they've got an edge. And so it's just like, I mean, I think if you're the Pacers, you wouldn't mind avoiding that. That being said, I have a hard time imagining that they will. I don't think Milwaukee has enough juice, down the stretch to hold. Basically, they're already a game back of Detroit. I don't see them catching them because I don't see them playing above their heads. Obviously, they have the best player out of that whole group. Obviously, they still have Giannis, and maybe Giannis is enough that they can ride him the rest of the way and win just enough to pass the Pistons. And I think they'll have a chance to, get some, basically close in tonight because the Pistons get the Thunder, and right now nobody's beating the Thunder. So the Bucks have a chance to get back in there. But
at the very worst, the 6th seed, we know that they will not have to play their way into the playoffs. Dustin, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as always.
Our friend from the Indianapolis Star, Dustin
Dopirak,
joining us on the program. Eddie, you've had like another 10 minutes to think. Have you come up with the answer?
No,
I think deep down you know the answer.
Do you think so?
Yes. You're being coy.
What do you mean I'm being coy, huh?
I can tell by the look in your eyes. So for those that are just joining the program, by the way.
Where have you been?
I told Eddie that we are over 2 hours into the show, and we've talked about plenty over the course of today. We remembered our friend and colleague, Jersey Johnny, and upon his passing, sadly, and a great contributor to the Indianapolis market, to the Indianapolis radio industry, and a friend, and what I believe to be the ultimate testament to someone, a friend and a voice for those who at periods of their life may have felt like they were void of both. And that's something that I think is the ultimate testament to Jersey Johnny. We talked about that. Camden Heide going into the transfer portal for Purdue, and perhaps the surprise of that, or what that may mean in terms of what we see now in the college basketball free agency and whether or not the impact that it's going to have long-term on the game. The torpedo bats in baseball, which there's been discussion may be outlawed, and then baseball says no, they like it, and the home run numbers are up. And Eddie went to a game with 64 other people in attendance last night and saw the Reds play, and even with torpedo bats, nobody could hit anything. And then we talked about the NFL owners meeting coming to a wrap and how not a whole lot came out of that except for a tush-push deal and some other rule changes that are fairly innocuous. With all of that, and we're going to talk about the Speedway Museum coming up in about 10 minutes and the renovations they've had there with one of the curators, there was a topic that I assumed was going to come up today, and it had to do actually with my preparation for the day. And my preparation for the day involves a shower that borders on OCD, and then product, and, I don't know if you know this, hygiene, very important to me. And for the most part, this kind of natural beauty and radiance doesn't require a lot of work, but I at least want to make sure that I'm clean. And then when I picked out just my presentation for the day, I thought for certain something would jump out at you.
Connor Enright committing to Indiana, of course. He was with Darren DeVries at Drake. Then he spent last season at DePaul. He announced about
point guard,
45 minutes ago that he's a junior with 2 years of eligibility left, and he will be playing for Darren DeVries at Indiana.
So that is the first kind of – I mean, obviously we know that Darren DeVries' son is going to be joining the program, right?
Well, here's the thing. He hasn't been granted that medical redshirt yet.
Correct.
He has to be granted the redshirt before he can.
He went under the threshold, correct?
He is currently in the portal with a do not tag list.
By the way, can you fill me in on what the do not tag means?
So the do not tag means schools cannot directly contact the player that is in the portal. So there's one of two things here that could be in play. Now, this is probably most likely when it comes to Tucker DeVries, is that he knows where he's going, so please do not waste your time in contacting him. The other aspect to this is, which is becoming more and more prevalent with NIL, is the fact that a lot of these guys are wanting their agents to handle their recruitment, kind of like free agency.
So this is basically basketball Tinder. Now on Tinder, do you have a do not contact? Is it like don't call me if I'm interested? I'll swipe and get in touch with you, but don't DM me. Is that what this is?
I don't know. Never been on Tinder, Jake.
What about the Bumble?
Never been on Bumble either.
But you got all the single friends. They don't tell you about they don't tell you about this. They don't fill you in. Alec, your one friend, is he not on the Bumble Tinder?
I'm not going to put Alec's personal life out there.
Okay. I'm just curious. Can somebody let me know? Like, do they have this on the Bumble Tinder where it's like, you know what? Because can you imagine? I would have loved. I had to beg, scrap, and claw for colleges to take my transcripts and allow me to try to finish. I would have loved to have been able to go to schools and been like, I'm kind of interested in your school, but if I am, I'll let you know, and then we'll talk. But don't call me. I'll call you. We got 19-year-old, 20-year-old people. Don't call me. I'll call you. If I'm interested, I'll let you know. What a life, right? Connor Enright is there. There were a lot of people from the get-go that assumed that he was going to be a player for Indiana. Is he basically a Gabe Cupps revisit?
I feel like he's more
similar
of the
number,
scrappy
similar size
defender type,
What do I always say? When you play pickup basketball, you go to the Hyper at IU. You go to Lifetime Fitness before they put in the pickleball courts. You go to Rucker Park. You go down on Fall Creek. Wherever you're playing pickup ball. It's not the 6'7" guy with a sweet touch that bothers you. It's the 5'11" scrappy guy that's sweaty and glazed over with hairy shoulders that bothers you. That guy annoys the hell out of you. He's checking you up at the free throw line on the opposite end. He's like an amphetamized chipmunk out there playing defense, and you're like, what are you doing? And it throws everybody off their game.
Can you imagine if
you need a guy like that
was on amphetamine?
Yeah, we have one actually. It chewed through our phone lines earlier, right? That's why we couldn't take calls. We're giving tickets away. So what do? I went ahead and I went with the text, and bada boom, we took care of it. Best laid plans, Eddie. You got to have a backup plan. Wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, right?
No, not at all.
In Indiana's case, maybe this is maybe not backup plan with Connor Enright, but that was necessitated also because one of the players that I think many people thought was a candidate for an Indiana transfer, Ryan Conwell, of course, from Indianapolis, ended up at Indiana State after his first year playing down in the state of Florida. Then he went to Indiana State, transferred from there, went to Xavier, got a big payday, now going to go to Louisville. And I don't blame him. Louisville, Pat Kelsey is...
He's building something down there, Jake.
I'm telling you. He's got a nonstop energy. When Pat Kelsey took the Louisville job, if you recall, it was kind of mocked because he's the guy that was like doing stand-up of self-deprecation in the press conference. And then Louisville posted a video of him touring through the Yum Center and going on and on about he couldn't believe this was his office. And there was an element of charm to it, but things like that are going to go one of two ways. And he kind of put himself out there. Now, they absolutely blew Indiana off the floor to begin the year. And that was the Bahamas weekend where West Virginia was also there just before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where Indiana first made contact with, I don't know if there's a no tag part of it.
The Battle for Atlantis?
With Darren DeVries. But I also think that Indiana, Pat Kelsey and the Louisville staff, and perhaps Gonzaga, but certainly Louisville, I think had some pretty good intel on Indiana and what they were going to try to run. And they absolutely ran them off the floor. But then we found out that was not just an anomaly. Louisville had a very good year. I always kind of liked Louisville growing up. I think I mentioned that. The old school Cardinal logo I really like. And when you were growing up in Indiana during the peak of Indiana basketball or Purdue, either one, you were really, for the most part, you hated either Kentucky or Louisville, one of the two. And then the other one, you kind of saw it as like, yeah, they're not so bad. And Louisville was the one that I didn't dislike. I always kind of liked Louisville. But what Kelsey's done down there is impressive, but he has an energy about him that I think is allowing him to draw some players for sure. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum is up and running and unbelievable. And a guy who has worked very hard in putting it all together, and I'm going to be involved with a very special evening with him at the Can Theater on April 17th to show off in film some of the stuff that you can see at the museum. Jason Van Sickle joins us next. 2 o'clock hour on a Wednesday. My understanding is the weather's supposed to be bad later today, if it's not already, later tonight. So certainly be careful, everybody. It is a day and a month that has been a long time coming at 16th and Georgetown. And I don't mean the fact that in May we are getting set for the Indianapolis 500-mile race in the greatest month of the year in this city, but the fact that when you drive underneath the tunnel forever, you have always seen the museum in front of you, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum. And then, of course, it has been silenced for quite some time as they renovated it, and it is now roaring back. And from all accounts, I have not been there yet, but everybody that I know who has said it is absolutely stunning and unbelievable. Joe Hale is the guy that oversaw all of it, and one of the main players involved joins us on the program. Jason Van Sickle is the vice president of curation and education for the museum and joins us on what I'm sure is a very busy time. Jason, congratulations on the overhaul.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time today, and it's a very special time for us here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum.
Let's begin with this. When you first walked in knowing that there was going to be a renovation to the facility, and you wrote down and you sat down in a brainstorm and jotted down the things that you wanted to make different, what was the number one goal or the number one emphasis that you felt has been achieved?
You know, when you think about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and its history and its worldwide recognition, we wanted the IMS Museum to be able to tell the stories of that in a way that would be world class. And really that was the emphasis from our board of directors down through Joe Hale, our president, and then obviously our exhibition team that was tasked with working with our great partners in this project to deliver this final project.
When you look at, I guess, the interaction for kids, to me, Jason, that was something that I felt was needed, and I've talked to people that have said just the visual effect of it and the interaction that is available for people of all ages is captivating. How much an emphasis was that, and how pleased are you with that?
Well, I mean, you go to any museum that has been developed over the last pretty much 20 years, and you see a lot more hands-on learning. That not only is for younger audiences, but also if you do it right, you will have kids of all ages that are attractive and want to take part in those interactive. So, you know, bringing young fans to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum and exposing them to the history of the Speedway, of the race itself, all the events that happened here. That was one of our keys. About 8 months ago, we hired a director of education named Jacob Paulos that really hit the ground running and developed our Alan Whitehill Clues Foundation Innovation Workshop, which is a STEAM classroom, if you will, that will really showcase a lot of those components that make up that acronym, because racing is a real life test bed for that. So, you know, we wanted to have the museum to be a vessel for younger audiences and really start their journey as becoming race fans and fans of IMS.
What's your favorite display?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard, you know, going through this whole process and you know, the ability to do this storytelling that we could not do before. You know, the starting line, it's more of a experience than a presentation. We have an 80-foot long by 20-foot wide LED video board that starts in front of you and curves up above you. And then the rest of the room is staged as you're on the front straightaway. And it plays about a 6-minute presentation of what it feels like to be here during all the pre-ceremonies of the track. It starts from, you know, before 6 a.m. when the crews arrive, the cannon going off, all the pomp and circumstances of the pre-race ceremonies that make the Indianapolis Motor Speedway or the 500 more than a race. And the experience and ovation that we've received from the people who've been able to go through it so far and today, I think we really hit the nail on the head with that.
When you look, Jason Van Sickle is our guest. Actually, let's get to this. For people that want to check this out, the hours of availability, the ticket availability is acquired how and when?
Yeah, so you can pre-order tickets, and we are pretty much recommending if you want to come during the month of May, definitely want to snag your tickets on our website quick because we believe they're going to go pretty fast. But starting today, we are open till 5. Our typical hours are 9 to 5, $25 adults and $18 for children. Children under 5 are free.
How many winning cars of the Indianapolis 500 are on display, and are there cars? I know in the old days, Jason, I'm using air quotes, you had a basement where things were stored and there was a rotation that goes through. Is everything now on display?
Yeah, no, we do not have everything on display. We still do rotation, which keeps the museum fresh and allows us to tell more stories. But right now we have about 34 Indianapolis 500 winning cars on display through rotations. Most are owned by the museum. But then we do have some on loan. The Penske Gallery has another 5 winning Indianapolis 500 Penske cars on display, so that adds to that item of cars that are on display. But, yeah, and then we have a rotation of rotating exhibitions in addition to the 500 cars.
I was told that one of the cool things was the ability to see the garages and as they have transformed over years. Now, are there actual simulated built garages, or is that done via like an LED video display?
They are physically built garages. We went through kind of the painstaking research of trying to make them as accurate as possible, going all the way back to the beginning when they built the garages in 1913. Through the transition through 85, 86, when they changed to the concrete garages we know today. So we have 7 of those. They are vignettes. Our restoration team did a really great job and tedious job of trying to find those authentic parts and pieces, whether it was to that car specifically or tools of the era, advertising of the era, things like that. But with our Gasoline Alley gallery, you can truly walk through history, looking at the vehicle's evolution over time. And then on the flip side of that, on the left side, we have display cases with the garage facade, but it highlights the artifacts from those eras as you walk through.
Jason, years ago when I worked at Channel 6, there was a guy by the name of Paul Castanoli. Now, I don't know if you would know the name Paul Castanoli or not, but Paul Castanoli, WRTV had a lot of the archived video that, as I understand it, ended up going over to the Speedway or to the museum, was video all the way back from the 40s and 50s and 60s on film, and then on 3/4-inch tape, and on all the different evolutions of film. WRTV had practice sessions and qualifying sessions and all of that film. And literally, you could not walk into the WRTV building without seeing Paul Castanoli on his own time, painstakingly dubbing and transferring all of that video and all of that film into the modern era of digitizing it and everything else. I think he is a behind-the-scenes hero of the historical archive of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We lost Paul about a year ago, but he was just a hero and a champion in that regard. It is my understanding that on April the 17th, now I did a thing over the weekend, the Can Theater is doing a series of films in relation to racing to kind of ramp up for the Indy 500, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do a little intro and Q&A for the movie Winning with Paul Newman. You're going to be with me, as I understand it, on April 17th, and we're going to show off some of the archived film of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, correct?
Yeah, so we're really excited that Can came to us with this idea because obviously it's great to watch this film and get it out there. The museum has a treasure trove of film. The actual physical reels are out in L.A. In temperature-controlled storage to help preserve them. We want to work on a long-term project to digitize these pieces. But yeah, we have a couple options. We're going to have a sit-down presentation. The 2 in particular that we're going to display are the old Champ Bailey Championship race films, which if people watched back in the 90s and early 2000s, the 500, the Classic Series with Donald and Mike King, a lot of that footage was these championship race films footage. And so I think not only seeing the the races themselves, but seeing that presentation along with you and I kind of giving a background and talking about them is going to be a great evening event.
It'll be a lot of fun. April 17th, Can. That's Kankan, by the way. Can Film, certainly on my X-Post Twitter. You can get more information or Google for the Can itself for ticketing information on April the 17th. Jason, a lot of work. I know how much has gone into it from a fundraising effort, from all of the ways that you guys had to appropriate all of the money to do it, and certainly appreciate. By the way, people get on me. Jake, it sounds like you're trying really hard to pronounce museum weird. Is it museum or museum? What way do you say it?
Well, I guess I'm a Hoosier, so I say museum. But being in the building and hearing people talk about the museum, as long as they say Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum, they're saying it right.
Now, am I saying it wrong? Let me say, Jason. I'll let you judge. I'm just going to naturally say it. Museum.
Yeah, it is on the opposite side. So. Wait a
minute. Wait, you say it again, because I don't see how I'm saying it different, and I'm not disagreeing with you. Say it for me, Jason, real quick.
Yeah, museum.
So you're saying the E in there, and I'm saying it more zam, right? Museum. Am I dropping the E? Is that what I'm doing?
I think you're pronouncing the second half of it, correct?
Museum, I need to say, as opposed to museum.
Yeah.
I can't. It's weird. Like it's like you know how some people, they're like, I don't know. I can't smell like firewood or whatever. Like I can't see. Yeah. I can't hear it. I don't know. Well, either the big building inside between turns 1 and 2 that has awesome collections and also is home to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame, right?
Yes.
Okay. Of which I'm a voter, so I should be able to say museum correctly. Jason, I appreciate it. We'll see you on the 17th. All right.
See you soon. Thank you.
All right. Again, Jason Van Sickle, the Vice President of Curation and Education. I'm not trying to say it weird. I just have always said the other word that when I was a kid, I used to always say, for example, Eddie, a Schwinn is a what?
It's a bike.
But what's the long form word?
Bicycle.
Okay. A Harley Davidson is a what?
Motorcycle.
I always said motorcycle. And people are like, well, motorcycle? What are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know. If it's a bicycle, and the prefix, you remove the prefix and change it from bi to motor, isn't the suffix the same? Sickle? Why is it a bicycle and a motorcycle? I never understood that. And I said motorcycle for like the first 50 years of my life.
Are we sure it's not bicycle?
Exactly. When I had to call the MotoGP event at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, can you imagine what people said when I said that here you had a bunch of motorcycles that were going around the museum? My gosh, people lost their mind.
Imagine if you took one of their cars out for a spin and crashed it.
Well, I did. Let me tell you, they offered 2-seater rides for the MotoGP, and people did it and were like, yeah, your knee gets right on as they take the turn on the back of the motorcycle. No thanks.
Would you be able to fix it?
My dad, my old man can, because he's a television repairman, has the ultimate set of tools. Eddie figured it out. My T-shirt of the day. My T-shirt of the day, Eddie finally discovered what it was. And if you're not watching on the YouTube channel right now and you're listening on the radio, we'll tell you what it is next. Looks like there are tickets available for tonight's Pacers-Hornets game, by the way.
Really?
Says online $2 resale.
You know, Jake, we didn't do your what did we call it when the Lakers were in town and there was the line of people out outside of the hotel.
How hot's the hotel line?
Yeah.
Now the Lakers, I rated it an 8.2. I think is what I rated it. Right?
Yes.
That bumped up to a 9.5 because I later that day was walking downtown and walked past said hotel on Washington Street, and the buses were lined up, and it was mayhem. Now, I'm imagining for the Hornets right now, probably tumbleweeds, right? It'd be a 2.0. There's probably somebody there to get like a – yes, that's probably what it – is there anybody waiting outside for – who's the most marquee Charlotte Hornet that would be here?
Miles Bridges?
I mean –
I don't know if LaMelo's traveling or not, but
there you go. That would be
Mark Williams.
Mark Williams, and he's confused as to why he's there. Yeah. Yeah, LaMelo, I guess if you had a pair of big baller brand tennis shoes, then he signed those. Since did those ever actually take? Did anybody ever actually get a pair of those shoes?
I don't know.
They were $500, weren't they?
Kind of like with the Parfum de Mayonnaise. Wonder if anybody got any of that.
There's no way. Boy, you look at the roster for the Hornets. Yeesh. Seth Curry, would he be up there?
I forgot he was there still.
Just misspell your first name when you sign it, could you? Eddie figured out, by the way, what do you think of the shirt, Eddie?
Solid. It's nice.
I am wearing a Ridgemont High School Wolves shirt. Did you know that they're the Wolves?
Yes. Did you know they only played one half of football?
Yes, and they played it for some reason after Christmas, right?
Yeah.
Yes, they were up 42-0 at the half over Lincoln. I think I told you one of my great joys and prides in life is when I worked at Channel 6 and had to, on Friday nights, build the score ticker that would run at the bottom of the screen of all the high school football scores. Tim Bragg and I, every single Friday for 2 consecutive seasons, put in Ridgemont 42, Lincoln nothing on the scores that ran in between, like, Westfield and Noblesville scores. Speaking of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, in the scene where the 2 cheerleaders are leading the pep rally, and the one cheerleader says, you just don't know what it's like to do something people are going to make fun of. It bugs the heck out of Gina and me. One of those cheerleaders is actually the sister of Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen, who we played earlier on the show because he is a Jersey musician, and we tributed throughout the course of today Jersey Johnny, and would certainly hope that people continue to think about Jers and his family on this day. Is John on location today?
He is on location, as in this studio.
Gotcha. James just walked in for the transition, and James, I'll let you answer this. We've been in here. Weather was supposed to be bad all day. Has it happened yet?
It has not started storming yet, but it's really warm outside, so do with that what you will.
How's the sky look?
I mean, it's gray.
It's not green, is it? It's when things get green that all hell's going to break loose.
It's not green yet, no.
Okay, well, that's good. As long as it's not green. I do know that I believe it's tomorrow John is at Coach's, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That is correct.
But today he will be here. We will talk, obviously, tomorrow plenty about what happens tonight at the Fieldhouse between the Pacers and the Hornets, and start to get into college basketball and the Final Four. Obviously, the transfer portal will continue to be a major storyline, and we'll continue to watch. This is probably going to be what carries us through even beyond the Final Four, and then start talking about the breakdown of – not the breakdown, but Houston, Duke, Auburn, Florida. Eddie,
maybe Mike DeCourcy tomorrow to break that down, Jake?
Okay, that'd be cool. I'm a fan of DeCourcy. It feels to me like this Final Four, and I know, and I don't mean it because there weren't upsets and that kind of thing. From a competitive standpoint, it's very intriguing. And any of the 4 teams, you can make a very sound argument why and why not they're going to win it. But maybe I'm alone here, but it does feel to me to be 4 teams that you just kind of think to yourself, okay. Like if you walk into Baskin Robbins and they have pistachio, Coffee, you're like, okay. There's nothing that overly jumps out about those teams, I don't think, for most people. John has arrived in his Pacers
Baskin
Aviation.
Robbins, did you?
Yeah. Is
One
it
in Greenwood
31 or
closed.
Is it 31 or 33 flavors?
33. One was called Breslers. Breslers? That was 31. 33, I think. 31 is Baskin Robbins, I believe.
Baskin
31
Robbins is
because
31?
it used to be on Highway 31. That's what I remember right. And Greenwood is no longer there. Baskin Robbins. How about this? Is the most glorious for us growing up, the most glorious ice cream place outside of Dairy Queen, obviously. The Chocolate Mousse.
Okay. There was one of those in Bloomington, right?
Yeah. There's one in Nashville now.
I was a huge fan of Linder's. Linder's in Indianapolis had double dip for a dime time. I used to think that was a special they ran. Then I later realized it was always double dip for a dime time.
What was the grocery store chain too, or
the grocery store chain?
What was that called?
Which one? Here locally?
Yeah, Linder is a what the hell?
Oh. So Linder's also had convenience stores, I think.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I was a big fan of the Cow Palace in Shelbyville. Also, every town had their little place like that, right? Like the milkshake place.
Ben Danner, that I know, who teaches and coaches baseball down at Southport's family business when he was young was 3D.
3D?
3D.
And that
How awesome is that?
I don't.
Shout out to Ben Danner.
I don't remember 3D though.
You don't remember 3D?
No.
Oh God, that's where I got all my Star Wars guys.
See
3D. That's where I found the Jawa and his cloak. Nobody can find the Jawa in his cloak.
Okay, how about this? Do you remember? I remember this when the Star Wars figures came out. The one that was the most anticipated, the Mickey Mantle rookie card of those, was Boba Fett.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wanted
Boba
Fett.
Well, I mean, initially, you could shoot that little missile out the back, but then the kids choked on it or something, and they stopped.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's kind of like Mikey from Life Cereal. He ruined everything. Yeah. He ate the inside of Stretch Armstrong and blew up, right?
It was like the Battlestar Galactica. Remember they used to be able to shoot the little way, and then they stopped because I think some kid choked on it or something.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Stretch Armstrong, the gelatinous middle of it was like, no. Mikey from Life Cereal blew up from that. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought he died from Pop Rocks and Coke. That too.
Pop Rocks and Coke right there. Hey, by the way, R.I.P. Shout out to Jersey Johnny. I heard what you had to say about him at the beginning of the show. That was really well done. He has been so long, for decades, a part of the fabric, whether it's with the Honor Flight, which he was so big of a part of, but sports around here, and he'll be missed.
He definitely will be. John is up next, and we will be back with you at noon tomorrow. We thank you for listening to Query & Company.